We'll kick it over to you.
So we're going to get started. So thank you, everybody, for attending our panel today. My name is Mike Bienvenu. I'm the Product Marketing Manager for Datto RMM. And we are going to be discussing how to enhance endpoint security. While it says Datto RMM, it's not necessarily Datto RMM. We've got some of our panelists who are experts with the product. And, when relevant, we'll talk about how to do so with Datto RMM. But in many cases, a lot of stuff we'll be talking about will be agnostic to whatever RMM platform you may be using. Our panelists that we have Ryan Weeks, CISO for Datto, Phil Geraghty, who's our defect manager on the Datto RMM product management team, Lee Evans, MD for Vital Technology Group, and Mike Philipsen from Cyberdyne IT. So gentlemen, let's start with Mike. You recent addition to this panel. Why don't you just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, how long you've been in business, and fun fact about yourself.
So first of all, this is my first panel ever, so
no pressure.
I'm sorry about that. I'm working at Cyberdyne as team leader of our system operations team. We just built a team around the Datto product and the building policies and doing automation. I'm now working with the product for 3 to 4 years. My team has got 10 people large. We're just focusing on the deployment of new scripts and so on.
Okay. Lee, how about yours? Oh, wait a sec. We didn't get your fun fact about you.
Beg your pardon?
No, hold on a sec.
Fun fact.
Yeah, tell me something fun about you.
Yeah, isn't the T-shirt fun enough? So.
Why is it Wi-Fi is the worst?
You got it, right?
All right, Lee.
So good morning, my name is Lee. I run a business called Vital based in North Yorkshire in England. So we're a 30-ish person MSP. We work with businesses, a big focus at the moment around financial services and regulated customers. So security is a huge part of what we do. We've been working with Datto RMM for maybe 3 or 4 years. Prior to that, we used a couple of different RMM products to automate and help us to manage those endpoints. We look after around 5,000 endpoints at the moment.
Fact?
Fun fact? No, I can't think of one either.
Triathlete, aren't you?
Pardon?
Aren't you a triathlete?
I do some triathlon. Yeah, there you go.
Every now and then.
CrossFit nerd. There you go.
All right, Ryan.
Ryan Weeks, Chief Information Security Officer for Datto. My previous experience with RMMs was more in the enterprise space, so I spent a lot of time in financial services. So looking at enterprise solutions, Jamf, Bomgar, Tanium, like very enterprise-focused RMMs. And with the Autotask acquisition, I found myself overnight kind of inheriting a product and working with actually a very capable engineering team behind the RMM product that really has built a solution with security in mind. And parents can't have their favorite kids, but I really, really, truly enjoy working with the RMM team. They're a fantastic group of very, very intelligent folks. And my fun fact is I'm a recovering marathoner, multiple marathoner, took a couple of years off due to injuries, and I've filled that free time. I'm a voracious reader of dystopian fiction.
All right, Phil?
I'm Phil Geraghty. I am a product defect manager for RMM, so I've been with the company for a couple of years now. Before joining Datto, I actually have 10 years experience working with RMM technologies through MSP, and about 20 years experience actually in IT itself. I know how RMM should work, and that's what I try and bring through, basically. Fun fact, I'm actually a black belt in Iaido, which is a Japanese martial art, which is for wielding a samurai sword. So
That's awesome.
Be careful which questions I ask over there.
He is absolutely shat all over our fun fact.
Yeah, although since joining Datto, I've tried not to use it. Tried.
Might be frowned upon in the workplace.
The head count hasn't gone up.
So just mind your questions. Yeah.
Interesting.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
All right, so I really want to keep this to be quite an open dialogue. We're going to spend some time getting some questions from the audience as well. But to get the conversation started, we want to get an understanding of kind of your perspectives of kind of the current threat landscape. Obviously, it's something that we felt the need to have a conversation about at DattoCon. It's been kind of themed in a variety of different the presentations, keynotes, and so forth. So just on your perspectives, right? Each of you come from kind of different angles within the space. How do you see the current state of affairs right now? Mike?
Yeah, it's getting worse every day, yeah. So ransomware as a service is the new product, yeah. And
Yeah, it's true.
it's quite hard, yeah. Just go to the darknet. You don't need to know anything about that. Just log in and book some ransom attack. Easy as hell. And this is the point where we, as the MSP, have to have a good look at our customers and ourselves, especially, to be protected and to protect our customers.
So you raise an interesting point, which is it's not just protecting the customers, it's also protecting yourself.
Yeah, right.
Right? So that's going to be something that I think we're going to dig into a bit more, which is, the access to which potential threat actors have as a result of the security that you employ within your own operation. Right? Lee, what do you see?
Well, I agree. I think the current state of affairs is pretty terrifying. In my experience, the adoption, particularly in the SMB space that we work with, the adoption of cloud services has actually bred an increased lack of awareness and perhaps an increased sense of security in SMB customers that is opposed to the reality of the situation, which is that they're more and more at risk every day. They think when they adopt Office 365 or whatever product that may be, they think they're actually adopting a secure platform out of the bag, if you like, in my experience. I think the subject of the presentation today, of the panel today around endpoint, I'm a big believer that endpoints have become really a very neglected part of the security landscape. People are focused on phishing and 2FA and a lot of these things, but the endpoints are still where the users live on a day-to-day basis. It's where they interact. It's where they probably get phished in the first place. So I do think that endpoints have become heavily neglected and are a really important aspect of securing your estate.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, very, very many things to kind of dig into here. I think first and foremost, I'll start off with saying I'm allergic to fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I think too many vendors will stand up and spout scary stuff at you and tell you how concerned you should be. And the reason I'm allergic to it is because when I feel fear, uncertainty, and doubt about something, it's because I don't understand it. And so it's actually very interesting when I've been so focused on like the threat landscape of attackers attacking MSPs and kind of how ransomware is bifurcated from like drive-by ransomware infections delivered through exploit kits now to ransomware as a service in the US and Canada, that when we put this panel together, we were like, oh, it'd be really great if we could find a European MSP that has been attacked and have them sit on the panel. We could not find one. And I still, to this point, cannot find a European MSP. So I think a lot of the like vendors and even to some extent Datto, standing up here saying you're under attack, you're under attack, you're under attack. That's true for MSPs in North America. That is not yet true here. But when you understand, well, from the targeted MSP threat, like attackers targeting MSP specifically, we're not seeing that rate over here that we're seeing in the US. And when we dig into that problem, we don't actually understand why that is yet. And there's no logical reason why it's not happening here. So my call to action is learn from what is happening in North America to MSPs, because there's absolutely nothing stopping that threat from migrating its way over into your regions, right? And I think from the threat landscape perspective, we touched on ransomware as a service. I think you really want to be informed about why MSPs are being attacked and how ransomware is delivered. You should spend some time educating yourself about ransomware as a service, how it incentivizes attackers to go after large networks and MSPs. Once you have that understanding, it will actually help frame the threat landscape for you quite well. So
it's an interesting point there. I just want to kind of explore a little bit. So do you have any understanding why MSPs in North America specifically may be more targeted? I mean, the internet has no geographic borders, so how does that become a thing?
Maybe density of the market, maybe?
Yeah, I think just the nature of how IT services are delivered in the EMEA region is slightly different. I think on the U.S. side, there's been more of a wholesale adoption of managed services away from break fix. They own like the full stack of IT, and that's just further along on that kind of, I don't call it a maturity curve, but I don't know that it's a part of a maturity curve. It's just a different adoption model of how to deliver IT services. And I think we're starting to see Europe move more in that same direction. And so my hypothesis is that as European markets kind of adopt that trend towards MSPs, they will start to become attractive targets. So I actually think it's just where we are regionally on that curve of how we deliver service. So again, all the study that I've done, there's nothing preventing an attacker group from coming after an EMEA-based entity. But we're just not seeing it yet. So you have a tremendous advantage that you get to learn from everything else that is going on and implement and kind of put your shields up before it kind of finds its way over here.
Yeah,
well, how about you?
Certainly, I think that's what we found is when I looked at it, as I said, I worked in MSPs for quite some time. And the thing that was interesting for us is the notion of, well, we're only a small company, so we wouldn't get targeted. And I think right now in Europe, we still have that to an extent. But as the market increases, as certainly in EMEA, we have more MSP, less break fix, and people are finding it easier to target those more high-tech, more automated industries. We will probably have a little bit more to deal with.
Yeah. I don't know if you're taking questions yet, Mike.
Yeah, we can take some questions.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, I was just wondering on that point, do you think that EMEA, not necessarily...
It is. You have to speak.
Yeah.
You have to speak more like this.
Okay. So in EMEA, do you think that it is perhaps the end users aren't out there looking necessarily for an MSP? They're looking for IT solutions that a different stack, rather than in the States where they may be, States and Canada, where there's that MSP awareness at end user level that is, I mean, we're all MSPs. We'll all be doing it for quite some time, but we don't necessarily call ourselves MSPs.
Right.
The end users aren't looking for MSPs.
Yeah,
So-
I definitely have, and my understanding of this is still evolving. And so my call to action to you is actually come and talk to me, because I've gotten a group of my industry peers together, security people at other channel vendors that deliver similar solutions, and we're actively talking about this, and not a single one of us can figure out why this threat is not occurring in this region. And we're some of the, in theory, some of the brightest, most informed people. And so my current hypothesis is it has to do something with how the business model of IT services is occurring in this region.
Or perhaps, I mean, Lee, you may have a better feel for this, but perhaps the GDPR work we've been doing for the last few years has given sort of an incidental protection from that. There's an awareness there. I don't know. I mean,
I can't explain it either. Ryan and I were talking about it over dinner, and when he said, look, we can't find any in Europe where this is happening at the rate, which was explained to me hundreds a week in North America, which blew me away. My takeaway from this conference is, for me, the MSP has just become the customer's biggest risk as far as I'm concerned, certainly
Yeah.
from what's been explained
Yeah,
to me.
it's-
That's really...
Still a customer there?
Yeah.
I'm going to go and tell my customers, more importantly, I'm going to go and tell my competitors' customers that, because I take great pride in the level of investment we
Yeah.
make to position ourselves and secure ourselves, and some of the things that
Yeah.
I'm sure we all see in terms of, you know, the people in our industry that we don't perhaps think are doing a great job. I think that's a great opportunity actually for us as a business, but I still, actually my instinct is I don't believe it. I don't know if the North Americans are more transparent, more open, are just talking about it more. I cannot believe that this type of attack where somebody exploits an MSP to then disseminate ransomware into their customer base hasn't happened anywhere in Europe. I refuse to believe it.
I do think we have an advantage, though, in that because we are a relatively young MSP market space within EMEA, we have the benefit that when we take on a new technology, so you know, when you bring on Datto RMM or whatever into your business for the first time, that product is already mature enough to have security already built in. Whereas maybe if you're an MSP that's been going for 25, 30 years, you might still have some of your legacy pre-security business practices that are actually very hard to shift.
Yeah. I do actually, I want to add one thing and then move us off of this, because I do want to get like into the weeds with RMM a little bit, but from the threat landscape perspective, these attackers, most of the tactics that we're seeing these organized cybercrime groups are going after supply chain. Yeah. So there's kind of two attack models. They're going after an end customer that you have that is of interest, and because you've done such a great job securing them and have focused a little less on your own security, you become a better pathway into that end customer. So it's one kind of consideration, and then RMMs and technology solutions providers become supply chain to MSPs, which is so they are focusing a lot more on supply chain. So I think as an MSP, again, you can benefit from that, and certainly RMMs have been a favored tool for these attacker groups over in the States. I mean, it's a built-in command and control system to all of your assets, right? So, and Phil's point is, yeah, we do a lot of things to bake security in, but the ways these RMM tools are being leveraged is primarily through poor identity and security practices on the RMM platform. So, Phil actually came up with a little thought exercise I want to do with you guys. How many of you would welcome an attacker to log into your RMM platform? Okay. How many of you would like your login experience to your RMM solution to be more difficult? Okay, there's a few of you. So this is the problem, right? Because, and this was one of the hard decisions we had to make when we decided to move Datto RMM to required MFA, is you don't want attackers to log into your systems, but you also don't want a more difficult login experience. And so we worked very closely with product to say, okay, we need to do this. We're going to be a thought leader. We're going to be one of the first RMMs to lead from the front and say, we are going to require this because you need our help to protect yourselves and your end customers. But we also don't want to screw this up and make your lives harder. And so we went through this, we actually worked very, again, closely with the product team and came up with this idea of like, we're really certain that this is a thing we want to do, but let's get feedback from MSPs. And that feedback has been absolutely, amazingly, overwhelmingly supportive.
Yeah, really good.
But there was also mixed in there a lot of like, hey, I would like it if it would behave this way, or could we do this? And that's like, that evolution has led us to kind of saying, hey, there's some awesome things that we have over here in our Datto portal login solution and over here in our RMM solution. And so if we're going to marry this security concept with usability, with like the usability consideration, we need to do it at the same time. And so I think that's one of the things that really makes Datto, kind of touting my own horn here, but I think we really listen to the customer feedback. And on the security side, like, I don't want a secure but unusable solution. I actually view my job as having to care about both. And so that's a really great relationship that I've been able to build with the product. And I think the way that we're going to deliver this out to MSPs is thoughtful of both aspects. And so I really appreciate the support that you all have put into, like, giving us the thumbs up that, we're ready, it's time to do this.
I actually think that having a less seamless way to authenticate onto any product is one of the best ways to ensure that your users bypass it.
Yeah.
So this is how you end up with, okay, we're going to have a 15-character alphanumeric string as your password, and you have to have special characters, and so you end up with your Post-it note under the desk, because actually no one can remember that. So yeah, by having two-factor authentication and other methods, it's a really good way to actually simplify the process.
How many of you have two-factor enabled on your RMM platform today? Okay. Yeah, if your hand's not up,
Isn't it default?
like by end of the week, that's something you should go in and enable. And RMM actually, it will be soon. We'll be requiring it by default soon. But don't wait for that to happen. You can do it yourselves right now. Go into your RMM platform and you can turn 2FA on just by having this two-factor code get emailed to all your techs. And it's just a very simple workflow change. You don't have to have them set up TOTP or anything else. And it just creates a higher barrier of entry, assuming the attacker doesn't have access to your email. If they have access to your email, you have bigger problems. So of those people that have RMM 2FA enabled, hands back up. How many of you are requiring MFA across the board for all of your channel technology? Okay. Yeah. Not yet, but I think there's a growing awareness of like your entire technology stack is necessary to do it. And I think as a vendor community, we have the challenge of we have to homogenize the experience or provide a way for you to have a single experience. It's not the right thing for the MSP to have to use 15 different MFA applications or methods. And so I think like understand that just where we're at an inflection point where in a shared responsibility model, we need to take this step together. And it might not be the best experience, but give us time, and as I continue to group my peers together on the security side, my hope is that we can actually come up with some solutions that make MFA really, really easy for MSPs across all technology stack, again, and kind of fulfilling Datto's open ecosystem kind of promise. We want to help kind of change the landscape and make it easy and usable.
Yeah, I would just like to comment on that, because what we're doing is that we have put Okta in front of our PSA implementation, and we are relying a lot of the linked accounts. So what I typically do when I create an RMM user is that I set a difficult password that I don't hand out to the end user, type it in and then delete it so that they can do the linked accounts. So I was hoping that there would be more Okta possibilities towards RMM instead of more multi-factor Google Authenticator approaches.
Yeah. So at a very broad level, our SSO plan, and I'm not going to make promises or timeline commitments, but one of the things we need to do is bring all of the products into a single login experience. And that includes PSA, which already has a single sign-on capability, as you pointed out. When you use Okta, a lot of MSPs uses your AD. Part of the reason that we're going to standardize on a single authentication platform is it's one thing for us to enhance, secure, and monitor, right? And it's much easier to do one thing than it is to do 7 things, as I have to, and they're all a little nuanced and different tech stacks and languages and regions, and it just becomes a kind of a complicated mess. So it's on our roadmap, and something we want to do is to allow you to kind of bring your own identity provider to the Datto SSO solution, which will then govern all of your products. Exactly when and where in the roadmap and on that path is still be determined, but it's very, very high on my request list. And you heard Emily Glass in the keynote this morning plugged our new product security manager. She's heading up that initiative, working very closely with me and Dan Flanagan on the product side, along with the RMM and PSA product folks to pull this entire plan together. This is really a company level initiative for us that we want to provide a unified experience for Datto RMM. But I assume some of you in this room are also not Datto RMM customers, right? Maybe you're using a different RMM solution. Show of hands if you want to admit it. Yeah. So, when we're talking a lot about Datto RMM, like these are things that you should be talking to your other RMM vendors about and asking what their roadmaps are to address some of these types of concerns, because a lot of what we're talking about, this is not a threat specific to Datto RMM. So I've been totally monopolizing this panel. I want to you should also hear from the people that actually use the product day to day. So maybe we can move into some of the features and functionalities of RMM that are helping MSPs secure their endpoint environments, because I think that's an important area we haven't touched on.
Before we move on, we did have a question.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that you've mentioned, and perhaps Lee and I can't remember your name.
Mike.
Sorry,
Mike.
Mike.
Yeah, the order's a little
you should be sat around the other way. It's a bit of a culture change, the two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. Just like in society, we may have not thought about seatbelts, drink driving, whatever it is. And you guys, along with Datto, you're helping us enforce that. I wonder what the feedback and the customers are saying when you're enforcing that to the customers. I think you implied you were putting that to the customers. That was one comment. And the other one was, Datto, you should be telling us what the US MSPs, how are they getting targeted and why are they getting targeted? You should be telling us that.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to get, if there are weaknesses and vulnerabilities that you know from that experience, then please tell us. I think
we have. This is just a how do I reach 16,000, 17,000 MSPs with a message is like incredibly difficult. But I actually organized a webinar maybe a month ago with ConnectWise, Huntress, ID Agent, and myself did a webinar where we dissected the anatomy of MSP breaches and attacks and turned that information into actionable intelligence. We talked a little bit about RMMs, as well as several other methods that attackers are getting into MSPs and end customer environments. And largely the message there is it's really simple stuff. Yeah. It's like manage your passwords, do 2FA, secure, you upgrade your systems, don't have RDP on the internet, like all that sort of stuff. And like RMMs can help you do a lot of that basic hygiene. And so I think an RMM, while it's a very interesting and attractive tool to an attacker, in your hands to manage your own IT hygiene is an incredibly powerful tool. I think like a lot of the announcements around the new scripting components are going to be huge to helping you kind of make sure that your baseline security controls are continuously functioning in your environment. And that entire scripting and components engine really unlocks a tremendous amount of capability for you to know and understand at every point in time whether or not your key security controls on your endpoints are actively functioning. I don't know, what do you guys use from a scripting perspective, or like how are you using RMMs to kind of make sure that your core security controls or baselines are met on a continuous basis?
Well, the way you've described it, we use a lot of the built-in functionality. We're an RMM, Datto RMM customer, so there's great built-in functionality there around basic AV status, Windows firewall status, so we leverage that significantly. That's obviously the very basic foundation of endpoint security. And then we've developed a number of scripts, and I think Mike, it sounds like, has probably developed a lot more than what we have to manage specific elements of the endpoint security that we are concerned or interested in. So the gentleman over here mentioned GDPR. We have something in the UK called CyberSmart, which is a kind of government recognised, accredited information and data IT security standard. So we've made a number of scripts that we can use in RMM to verify the status of the controls against the CyberSmart standard, for example. So we're able to provide audits and reports to our customers to show that their systems are in compliance, patches are up to date, and the local administrators is one that is something we've spent a lot of time, trying to develop and build a set of scripts in RMM that alerts us if the local administrators on machines are wrong or changed, because that's something that's been a perennial issue for us over the years. If you like, we come along and take everyone out, and then somebody pleads and begs to somebody and gets put back in, and that's something we need to keep tight control over. So that's one example. BitLocker is another example. We do a lot of BitLocker management, which we use the RMM components and scripts to verify the BitLocker status, verify TPM status, and again generate alerts and monitors and the ability to report on that information out of RMM as well.
Yeah. Sounds exactly the same things that we do. Let's say something like local administrator cons. You've mentioned that there are many of them on the devices, and before we had Datto RMM, we had the same problem that all the devices in our network has the same local admin password. Yeah, because it's so much easier to use that. But if this password is corrupted or get grabbed by an attacker, you have the party in your house. Yeah, so.
So what are you doing to review or audit, monitor to know that?
No, we have just a small component which we create to set the local admin password by a random string, and this random string is set to a UDF. So we know it in our documentation in our RMM platform, and we can easily switch it back if there's a necessity to give the user the password for a reason because he needs it.
Yeah.
Because there's no other way to do that. You just can change it.
The interesting thing with that is if you do that on a domain controller, obviously, then you can change the domain administrator password as well, which is really useful if someone leaves or whatnot. Obviously, you then need to reconfigure things, but it's in a pinch if you know that you haven't got things running as local administrator. It's a really easy way to very quickly tighten things up. One thing that I find quite interesting though is the concept of what encompasses security, because we've spent a lot of time talking about security risks being those attackers and just the sort of that hacking attempt, but it does also obviously encompass patching, antivirus, understanding your estate, and actually having a drill down sort of health report, if you like, of how everything is. I was very new into one of my MSP roles when the WannaCry thing happened, and we had patch management through, it was another RMM product, but it doesn't matter what the product was. We believed everything was fine, and actually, you get that one infection, and then you realize, okay, actually, we need to re-audit everything. How many people were affected by some form of malware attack in the last sort of 5 years or so? You have any of your partners? And it's a real eye-opener, isn't it? Because you think that everything is fine. So for us, we actually had to go all the way through the estate. We had about 3,000 endpoints, and there were just a few where there was one patch missing, which blocked all the other patches, but because of the way Windows Update works, it just said that there were no patches missing.
So
do you monitor something like that?
Sorry?
Do you monitor something like that?
Yeah, but because of the way Windows Update provided information, having no patches missing was also the same as having an inability to patch.
Yeah.
So the patching was broken on some of these machines, but there's no easy way to find out. And that's actually something that's really important, especially when you're bringing on a new partner, is actually making sure that you really do understand the environment that they have, because it's not always just as it first appears. And doing those audits is really...
it kind of raises an interesting point, and I think you guys will all have an interesting perspective on this next point. So there's so many different potential ways, some known, some unknown. How do you make sure that you can get everything covered? How do you know that every device is properly patched? You've got all those vulnerabilities, that every port, every local what do you do to ensure, sorry about that, what do you do to ensure that all the holes are filled?
Yeah, it's tricky, and it's hard work, and I think it really comes down to, as I said, when you first take on a partner, really taking the time to audit them and understand their infrastructure, and then building out what do I actually need to know to ensure that this partner doesn't have any downtime. And one thing that we found was, certainly from upper management, there's always a demand to monitor everything, but the more noise you create, the more things you miss. Because actually what you need to do is you need to understand what resource you actually have and how much time they can really spend on every endpoint. Yeah. So you have to really dial it down to the really important things: service availability, antivirus status. As you've probably all seen, we built this great new feature into RMM with the universal antivirus, so it now natively detects antivirus status for a whole suite. I think we've got like 15 supported products now. That's going up all the time.
There's also the security audit component.
The security audit, the BitLocker audit. We've had some really great components. A shout out to Stan Lee, who sort of champions a large majority of them. And also we've got the wonderful components from Cyberdyne that have just come in. So there's one on there for changes to your security group, which is something that's actually really interesting, because when you have systems administrators, which basically most of your engineers end up being, if you don't have sort of ingrained into your company ethos to write everything down, then it's really tempting as an engineer to just make that quick change for that person that I know that's just called because you recognize their voice, without necessarily understanding the implications. and then 6 months down the line, Gloria from finance has accidentally deleted something, or or the other way around. Someone from another help desk or an engineer has accidentally affected something in a finance folder, and you might not find that out until 6 months later when you go and find that document. And that's where I was thinking things like BCDR can come in if you've got it. But you kind of have to think about, how can I make sure that the people who need access have the appropriate access, not too much and not too little, and how to understand when that changes.
So there's an interesting point from the product standpoint.
I received an answer.
So from Datto RMM's perspective, we've got, as we become aware, we can help to develop solutions that help our partners implement more secure practices, make sure that we can help them audit to discover, resolve, and remediate issues that are encountered. But to an extent, we can't be all-knowing as well. We can only, we can do things that, for example, patch management. We don't cover all applications. We have select applications that we believe cover the majority of what our partners may be using. But
for third-party patch management.
As an example, right? But Ryan, someone in your position who has perspective on the entire landscape, to a degree, you could actually probably drive yourself a little crazy looking at all the potential ways that someone might take advantage of.
Yeah, sometimes knowledge is not power.
Totally
so
true.
I like to simplify problems in my world, and so I'm big on mental models. And one of the mental models I use in my day-to-day life is kind of almost borrowed from Sun Tzu, Art of War, and military. Know yourself, know your enemy, know your battlefield. Right? And your RMM tool is the thing that helps you know yourself. It's both giving you information and allowing you to audit your environments and tell you about the things you have, as well as to secure that environment for that battlefield with the tactics that you're seeing, or that your enemy will enact on you. And right now, again, going back, we talk about attackers and the scary things that are happening. They're not doing anything advanced. They're leveraging existing vulnerabilities, weaknesses in how you've configured your systems, open RDP to the internet, and stolen credentials. They're not doing anything. They're not 0 days or super magic hacker tricks in the background. So RMM is honestly, people are afraid of it, but it's your best friend. And so internal to our own security program, what I've built into my compliance, governance, risk, and audit team is, what do you know? How do you know it? Prove it, right? And that prove it piece is that audit piece. And if you're saying, what do I know? I know that attackers are going to leverage the Blue Keep vulnerability in Windows. How do I know it? I see active information from my partners or from Microsoft News. Okay, how do I know that my environment is protected against that? Well, I have Datto RMM, and it installs that patch for me. Okay, I'm going to let Datto RMM install that patch for me, and then I'm going to write a script to go through and audit my environment and make sure that every asset has that patch applied as a secondary check. And I think that if you just follow that model in almost everything you do, because ultimately it comes down to control effectiveness. How do you know that the thing that you deployed is working well 100% of the time? Your RMM, your RMM tool is the thing that gives you that intelligence. It is your gateway to assuring endpoint security. And if you leverage both the built-in components as well as the scripting language, you've got a tremendously valuable tool in your arsenal at your disposal. You just got to unlock that value. And the ComStore components, talk to your peers, ask what they're doing, share scripts. We'll be providing more scripts out through the new, Cyberdyne?
Yeah, so we released, 30
Not to be confused with Cyberdyne.
No. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, but no more robots, okay?
No problem.
But actually, it is an interesting one. I always found that actually one of the big problems is ownership at every level, taking responsibility for what you're doing. And actually, when you're an MSP, and I'll ask you guys your opinion on this, but we always found it quite hard to encourage our partners to take that extra step because of the usability.
Yeah.
Also, a little bit of blasé. Obviously, I've been out of being an MSP for a couple of years, so do you still find that it's sometimes difficult to encourage your partners to improve their security practices? What do you do about, if you, for example, have a prospect that maybe doesn't follow security to the extent that you would like, how do you evaluate whether or not you can convince them and whether or not actually it's worth almost taking that risk for you? Because obviously there is a little bit of collateral in that if you have a partner that you just take on and then they have an incident occur, then it's going to come back on you as the provider. So what can you do to mitigate that?
I think it's a challenge, and different types of customers in different industries respond differently.
Yes.
One of the reasons we are being particularly successful and focused on financial services, legal, because they have an external regulatory factor which is mandating to them the extent to which they need to take their security seriously. You asked about prospects now, ironically, and I'm sure that people, well, I hope, would feel the same, but excuse me, ironically, when you have a prospect, it's actually usually a really strong time to discuss their security position with them, and they're already in the market. They're talking to you about changing something in their estate, so they're open-minded. It's usually a lot easier to engage prospects than it is actually existing customers. I think comfort breeds apathy almost. They're in a comfortable position. You've looked after them well. They're happy with how things are going. So trying to encourage them to make a change is actually more difficult than a prospect who's already in a change mindset. I think setting realistic expectations with a customer. You mentioned patch management, and I'd love to know, is anyone here, is there anyone here who thinks that 100% of their machines have 100% of patches? If you are, then good for you, because I just think that's not possible. And the customers need to understand that for all of the best intent and all the best will in the world and all the measures and security practices we can put into place, there are always going to be weaknesses, there are always going to be vulnerabilities, and there are always going to be attacks that are successful. You don't have to look at, in our space, we're typically dealing with small businesses with no dedicated security budget, an IT budget which encompasses some element of investment in security, but the huge companies that are suffering targeted, you mentioned 0 days, really sophisticated attacks, those things are still possible. So setting a realistic expectation with your customer is a really important part of that journey, I think.
It also comes down to the understanding the financial risk. So for example, you might have a partner that says, I don't want to upgrade my machine because it's going to cost me 500 euros or whatnot. But actually, if that machine goes down, let's say it's a Windows 8, Windows 7 machine that they're very happy with using and it seems to work fine and there are no problems. If that machine goes down and you lose even a day's productivity, that can have a huge impact. And again, with that being an availability issue, then that becomes a security incident.
Yeah. We're talking about patching a little bit. Patching's a two-sided coin, right? Your OS and then your third-party packages on top of it. And I assume all of you are leveraging the third-party patching solutions inside of RMM. How many of you just only patch the third-party packages that Datto RMM supports? Okay, so you're kind of looking at all of the software on the machine as a whole. That's definitely the right approach. There was a study done a few years ago, and Phil challenged me to actually try and find the study, and I couldn't dig it up. But
did you do the study yourself?
No, I didn't. I didn't do it myself. But what it found is that like 80% of your endpoint vulnerability and risk comes from 10 to 20 software packages on the machine. Right? It's usually your Javas, your Flashes, your browsers, your Adobes. And so I think if you just look at what the third-party software is that's installed using your RMM to audit that and the versions, run that through some threat intelligence information, like go through CVE details, plug those packages and those versions in, get some information out about what the current vulnerabilities are. What you'll find is that, or just vulnerability scan your endpoints. What you're going to find is that you can eliminate 80% of your risk by managing 10 to 20 software packages on your machines, right? And again, simplify the problem. You don't have to become 100% tomorrow, Pick the top 5 packages, bang those out, get that working really well, and then add the next 5, and then the next 5, and just iterate towards that posture. Security is a continuous improvement thing. You're not going to get there with 60 months of, or 60 days or 6 months of gargantuan effort. It's a continuous commitment to improving your processes. And so just make your problems smaller, get on that path, create a sustainable and repeatable process that you can just keep adding things into on the patching
Something
side.
the RMM, when we take on a new customer, one of the things we can use the RMM for is to audit those, Flash, Java, Adobe Reader, and we have a fairly brutal approach to new customers. We ask the primary contact, do you know any reason why your users would have Java? 99% of the time they say no, so we just take it off everything because it's just not worth the risk. Java's so commonly exploited. You see, I'm sure it's the same here, but you take on a customer with maybe 80 endpoints, you probably find about 89 versions of Java somehow. So we just, we take them off and deal with the fallout later, and we do that with Java, PDF. We really strip the systems back to, as you say, eliminate that risk, that significant portion of risk that comes from software that the people probably don't use anyway. Just take it off, and the RMM makes that
So
really
that's an interesting
easy.
approach. Just basically strip it down, and then just by exception add in to only those people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting approach or discipline, not just on applications, but also
It's a hardening. It's a hardening. I mean, that's RMM can help you harden your systems, reduce your attack exposure.
But it makes that so easy for us. If there's 80 machines, a perfect example. We run the audit, what software's in place. We have a set of scripts that we've used for, we have one for Java, one for PDF, whatever. We know what the uninstallation commands are. We bundle them all together into a component that works for that client, and we just push it to 80 machines.
Would you go so far as to do a refresh of the OS at all, just in case there was any latent components that were still hanging around, some files or something that could potentially be unknown?
I don't think it's something we've considered, because the potential for impact on the user, I think, is probably a bit too great if you went to that extent. But we definitely, like I say, we just take off all the junk. And back in the day, Ask Toolbar, that was my.
How about you, Mike?
my
What do you guys do when you're bringing on new customers to kind of baseline them to a certain security posture?
We do a few things then. First of all, we onboard a customer with an IT check. So we have an audit for that, which we have built by ourselves, and checking the basic problems which the customer feels herself, and just trying to figure out how far he's away from our standard. And we get a scoring for that, and it says, okay, 100% would be top of the age, everything's great, but you never find a customer who has that. So you can show him the score, and it's just say, hey, okay, you have 40% network security and network, all the good stuff done. You should do this and this and that, and that will bring you up to 60 or 70%. So it's a bit of, maybe on marketing too. But
and then over time, do you work your customers to get to that 100%
right, we
threshold?
do, yeah. On a regular basis, once a year, we are doing Investitionsplanung, investment planning for IT. And this is the point where we talk about the same stuff every year again, and say, okay, you need to do this and you need to do that, and then we do a plan for the next 3 to 5 years with our customers.
So I like what you're saying there. So do you have these security conversations with your customers as part of maybe your quarterly, annual reviews, monthly reviews? Like, how frequently are you having these conversations?
Typically once a year, because he's doing his invest plan for the next 3 to 5 years, and he can plan the costs which are required to enlarge the security for himself. And if it's planned, it's much easier to everyone, to him, to us.
And how frequently do you report back? Like, do you provide ongoing reports that shows the state of their security scoring?
That's a continuous process, because we have virtual CIOs implemented in our company, and they are talking to the customer, I don't know, once a month or something like that. And they just keep talking about that. And if there's a larger vulnerability which we need to react to, we just do so. Most of the time, you have the trust of your company, of your customer, and he believes in that what you say, because he needs you to do that. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
I have a question for Phil and Ryan. What kind of security practices are you doing in Datto for your employees? Some examples.
My favorite actually is the phishing thing. I think that's really, really great.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, like,
we are told that there is a phishing email that comes to all of us, and yeah, basically, it's quite an interesting exercise to see who clicks on it.
It's like phishing awareness training.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, we do get phishing emails anyway, but I've never been able to pick out the one that comes from Datto. So I just click all of them. No.
Forward them to colleagues.
Which product are you using for that?
we use KnowBefore. Yeah, it allows us to fully automate it, and they actually let us pull in campaigns that actually are being run in the wild.
Yeah.
And one of the things we can do is we can actually modulate the difficulty of the phishing based off of the click rates of previous engagement. So if you click, it'll get a little bit easier, and then if you keep clicking the sequentially easier ones, you eventually graduate into a one-on-one training with a member of my team.
Congratulations, I like that.
And we laugh, but
How many of those have you
we've only had a handful.
Yeah.
And what I love about it is after we do those one-on-one trainings, those people have never engaged with a phishing email again. And they are now getting the hardest ones that we send to the employee base. So like my view of phishing awareness training is we have failed to deliver them a key piece of information to keep them protected. I don't view it as they're dumb and like they shouldn't work here. I view it as we have failed them. And so when they graduate, it really is a graduation. Okay, you have graduated into a course where we are going to provide you one-on-one education to help you better exist in this environment. And that's been tremendously successful for us. On the endpoints, we have RMM platforms that we use. I have tremendous amounts of reporting. I challenge my internal services teams all the time to prove to me that our security controls are functioning, and then I have them give me the reports and the data, and I rip it apart. And my philosophy is I approach everything from the assumption that it has failed, and I do not yet understand or know how it has failed, and so I rely on the data to prove to me that things are functioning, rather than assuming everything. Oh, I checked the box in RMM that it patches everything, so everything's patched. Like, okay, I know I checked that box, but how do I know that the patch is actually getting applied? Prove to me, okay, here's a patch. I want you to go out to the RMM and run a report for me and tell me that this patch, and they come back and they're like, oh, actually 2% of machines didn't get that patch, okay. Do we know why? Oh, it turns out WMI on that machine is broken, and like the automation didn't run. And I'm like, great, let's go fix WMI and get those machines patched. And like when we dig into these problems, we're finding like we're dealing with the same things you guys are dealing with, right? It's not like we have some magic solution, but it's just a commitment to like that having that posture. And I think just that mindset of I have that skepticism that all security people have, that like I am literally, like, just like I'm allergic to fear, uncertainty, and doubt, I'm allergic to a false sense of security. And I constantly challenge every decision I make, and I try to weed out cognitive biases that I have and how I think about problems by leveraging other people around me and saying like, here's some data, what do you interpret with this? Or here's a report, look at it for 60 seconds and tell me what you think it means. And like, helping them like think through the problem, I think it's that ability to bounce ideas off of people and is great. So yeah, we do a lot of stuff in our internal security program, and I could probably talk about it for hours. So
as much as I would love to keep this conversation going, unfortunately we've come to the end of our time. So gentlemen, thank you for sharing some of your insights and your perspective. Certainly, if you have any additional,
Thank you.
If you have any questions, certainly find them out in the conference for the balance of the day.
Yeah.
Please, if I could request that you go into the app, give us a rating so that we can keep these types of conversations continuing in future events. Thank you, guys.